Hey, good morning or afternoon, everyone. This is Mark Hamlin here, and today I'm going to take you through how to, automate your production scheduling within Business Central. Make things simple and easy to get that schedule done. So there's a number of manufacturing apps. We're going to be focusing on scheduling today, but there's a whole bunch in here. And what we have is starting from the beginning, when we're actually doing our forecasting and planning. So we do have a forecasting solution in there that uses the Azure AI forecasting model from Microsoft. And we also have an enhanced planning worksheet, we call it. So that's, so you can run MRP, you can run your purchase planning, all of that kind of stuff from within Business Central to generate that production order demand, right? Or supply, really, to generate all the production orders that we need to execute. Now, once we've planned that and we've got those production orders and purchase orders and everything else, what we need to do is go out and schedule what we've planned. Because the standard MRP in Business Central, as you likely know, backward schedule, infinite capacity, it's not going to give me a good schedule. So once we've planned it, we're going to send it off to do the schedule. And here you can use that graphical scheduler if you like, drag and drop or just visualize what's going on and make decisions on the shop floor on what you need to do for the schedule. Or you can use the MX APS. And this is what we're going to be talking about mostly today, where I can go in and have the system tell me what my schedule needs to be. And I can actually execute that on the shop floor without any manual intervention. Okay? Now, once we sent it to the shop floor, we go out and we need to capture what's happening during execution. So we need to know what we've completed and those sorts of things so that we can feed that back into the schedule. So the next time I run that schedule, we know what to schedule. Like if I finished, half the work on a production order, I only want to schedule the remaining half. I don't want to schedule that whole production order again. So Shop Floor Insight is a tool you can use to capture that, shop floor level detail, and that automatically goes into Business Central, and the scheduler picks it up when we run the schedule again. And as part of the Shop Floor Insight, it mentions quality here. We have another module that's quite often used in production called Quality Inspector. Quality Inspector allows you to do production quality inspections, inbound receiving, outbound shipping inspections, work center inspections, all of those sorts of things to capture quality during production or other stages of your supply chain. And in addition to this, in a couple of weeks, we will have a webinar on our new product called Maintenance Manager, which also comes into play here, because Maintenance Manager allows you to schedule preventative maintenance, to do break fix type stuff like indicate a machine is down, and all of that feeds back into the scheduling as well. So one of the nice things is we can actually do sort of maintenance scheduling in a way that's least disruptive to production as possible. So instead of saying, I'm going to take this machine down Tuesday at 8 a.m., well, maybe you have high priority orders that need to get done on Tuesday, and that's going to cause a major problem. What we can do with that Maintenance Manager is we can schedule that PM so it's least disruptive to the current production in play. All right, at any rate, what we did, we planned it, we scheduled it, we're executing, it feeds back in. Once we're done, and shop floor allows us to record output and consumption, all those sorts of things. Once we're done and we've reported the output, we need to get it out the door. So then it goes out to our warehouse management solution, if you like, or that WMS Express I mentioned, to actually, use barcodes to put it away or pick it and all those sorts of things. Warehouse Insight also allows you to do output and consumption. So if you don't need all the capabilities of Shop Floor Insight, you might just want to use Warehouse Insight to do your output. But at any rate, we can use Warehouse Insight for all the barcoding stuff we need to do. And the order fulfillment worksheet, basically calculates out what we can fulfill today, what we can ship today, generates pick tickets, all that sort of thing. And then finally, we send it out to be shipped. So if it's packaged, you could use the free Order Ship Express, or if you're doing LTL or you need more advanced shipping capabilities, you can look at our Dynamic Ship product, which allows you to get that product out the door. So again, we're going to plan it, we're going to schedule it, we're going to execute it. So this is kind of what we're going to focus on today as we get into the demo. Now, before I do that, let's talk about some of those capabilities that MX APS provides. So APS is actually Advanced Planning and Scheduling is what that acronym refers to. I prefer to actually, call it Automated Production Scheduling, because that's what it does. It's going to automate that scheduling process, right? So today, the people that are doing production scheduling have to have a deep knowledge of the products you're producing and the environment that you're working in and all of those sorts of things. And that's a challenge because, what happens is they go on vacation or they get overloaded or something like that. And you end up with pretty significant challenges maintaining the efficiency of the shop floor in those situations. So what we want to do is we want to take all of that knowledge, all of those rules and requirements for doing that production, and we want to systemize that. We want to put that in the system so that I can hit a button and get, an optimal schedule for my facility without having to rely on those people with that deep tribal knowledge and product knowledge of the system. So the way we do that in MX is, it's a finite capacity forward scheduling. So what that means, Business Central is infinite capacity, or I prefer infinite loading, but infinite capacity scheduling, and it's backward scheduling, which means I say, hey, customer wants this December 15th. It tells me when to start, and that start date might be in the past, depending on how long it takes to manufacture that product. And it's not going to look at sort of the existing load within my facility. I might have a machine center that says it needs to run 100 hours today to get all the work done. Well, that's not possible. So the finite capacity forward scheduling says, hey, starting at this date and time, like starting tomorrow morning, I'm going to schedule forward and tell you based on my capacity within the facility when that production order is going to be ready to ship. Okay? And the way it does that is, really the bottom part here, this process modeling. What we're going to do is we're going to model what your facility looks like, what your capacities look like, what your labor looks like, what your material, usage and requirements look like. And then we're going to go in and generate a schedule that matches what you've told us the facility looks like. And it sounds very fancy and complicated, but it's actually not hard to do. You probably already have done this. And as we go through that schedule, we're going to do sort of that automatic machine center selection. So what it's going to do is, if I've got several machines that can run a product, it's going to level load that equipment to generate the best schedule possible, right? And as part of that, if you've got setup times and you can eliminate some of that changeover time, like if I'm changing a mold or changing color or going from allergens to non-allergens or vice versa, whatever, we can do things to eliminate that changeover time. So we'll schedule those production orders to basically make your plant operate more efficiently because you're going to have less downtime due to changeovers, right? And this multi-segment, what that means is, maybe I have a mold change over time and a color change over time. We can set it up so that, okay, I only have to do the color change and we'll retain that mold for X number of production orders or vice versa. So we can do all those sorts of things. I mentioned, material and labor and everything else. So we can also constrain based on secondary constraints like, labor. Okay, yes, I have, capacity within my machines to do X amount of work, but maybe I don't have the personnel to run those machines. Well, we're not going to schedule that work unless you have that labor. Or, I mentioned molds. Maybe I don't have the tooling, the molds or whatever I need, dyes or whatever you're using for tooling to perform that work because it's already used for a different production order. So we can constrain on that. And of course, the obvious one is material. If I don't have the components to do the work on that production order, we're not going to schedule that production order. We're going to wait until there's, an incoming PO or transfer order for that material, or the lead time for that material has elapsed, and then we'll schedule that production. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of other goodies here. The lot splitting is kind of nice if you're in a, sort of a high volume environment where you're getting an order for 100,000 pieces or something. Without having to create multiple production orders, we can actually split that up into maybe lot sizes of 10,000 a piece. And then we can schedule that big production order across multiple machines or break it up so that other orders might fit in between them that are higher priority, those sorts of things. So lots of good stuff there. A few other little things. Bottleneck analysis, this is kind of handy, right? Now MX takes care of those bottlenecks for you. It knows how to schedule it well. But if you want to evaluate, what is actually causing my delays in the shop, you can do that. You can go ahead, there's a few different mechanisms you can use, but we dynamically calculate the queue time and the utilization of those work centers, and that'll help you identify bottlenecks. So you can say, yeah, I've got this machine here, that's my bottleneck. What if I run an extra shift on it? Or what if I get another piece of equipment in or something like that? That's going to make my schedule significantly better. So we can do those sorts of analyses as well. I mentioned finite capacity, but we can also do infinite capacity. Kind of goes with the bottleneck stuff here as well. But if you want to see what it would look like if you didn't have capacity constraints, you can do that as well. Okay. Net change rescheduling, again, so I don't have to necessarily reschedule everything. If a piece of equipment goes down and I say this is going to be down for the next few hours, I can do a quick net change schedule and see how that's going to impact, the remainder of the day as far as production goes, those types of things. And I already mentioned the plant equipment maintenance scheduling, which is, really you can do that without our maintenance manager product already, but our maintenance manager product really closes that loop. So you can actually set up, all your PM schedules and everything very easily. So it's a quick and easy setup on that maintenance manager. And then MX will schedule those maintenance orders for you automatically. So December 11th, this 2024, you can check out that maintenance manager webinar that we're going to have. All right, enough blabbing on the PowerPoint. Let's actually have a look at the software. So I'm going to go into Business Central here, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're actually going to try and schedule. So to do that, I'm going to go into product design here. We're going to look at the items. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the top level item that we're actually scheduling in the system. So what that is today we're going to manufacture these battery boxes, right? So we've got this AL, which is aluminum, and we've got SS, which is stainless steel. And if we come in here and we look at the structure of, oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. Let's just use the mouse so you see what I'm doing. We're going to check out the structure of this. And what we've got is we've got sort of our top level finished good, and then we've got subcomponents that need to be scheduled. And of course, these subcomponents need to be completed before we finish the finished good. MX, of course, takes care of all of that. And then we've got, all the work centers that we're scheduling this work on. So you'll notice everything here is scheduled at the work center level. For example, this laser cutter here. I've got a couple of different laser cutters in my facility, but I'm just scheduling at the work center level here, and the system is going to choose the best laser cutter to do that work on. Similarly with welding booths, right? I've got a couple of welding booths within the facility. We're just saying choose one to use, and the system will figure it out, and it's going to level load that equipment for me, right, to get the best possible schedule. Here on this press brake, we've said we're scheduling it on a very specific machine. So we're saying this is a long bracket, so we're scheduling it on this 10-foot machine. That's the one we want to run it on. And I'll show you the impact of that when we get into it, because this thing might get overloaded. And what do we do if my preferred machine isn't available? Well, we can deal with that as well. But anyway, this is the type of product that we're scheduling. Now, in your environment, if you have your routing set up so that we're scheduling at the work center level, like you've got everything at the work center level and everything else, and you've got your sort of expected times and all that kind of stuff, MX will probably work out of the box for you without a lot of engagement from us at all, right? So if you've got standard routings and they're in good shape, you could probably just run the setup wizard for MX APS, run the schedule, and away you go. Okay, but this is what we're doing here. Now, what I'll do is I'm just going to go into the routings here real quick and show you a couple of things here, just to show you what that looks like. So for this particular component that we're manufacturing, it has these two, work centers and machine centers on it. So again, laser cutter, we don't care which laser cutter you use, so it's scheduled to the work center. The machine center here, again, we said this is our preferred machine. And if I scroll over here, everything up to about this point is all standard Business Central, right? So if you've got your routing set up in a reasonable way, that should work just fine with MX. If you want to get fancier, you've got a ton of different options you can set all the way through here to control how the schedule works. So this is sort of that advanced process modeling where you can come in and do all sorts of things like say, yeah, we're allowed to break this operation up across shifts, right? Some things you can't do that, right? If I'm heat treating or I've got an oven going, I'm not going to walk away at 5 p.m. and come back at 9 a.m. and continue where I left off. We're not going to allow that to happen. But what I wanted to focus on here is this alternate, right? So what we did was we said, yes, for this particular component, we're going to run it on that 10-foot press brake. But we're also going to say, you know what, there's options. you could also potentially run that work on this particular machine here, but it takes longer to run and it takes longer to set up. So the rate on this is slower than my preferred machine. But this might be a valid choice, if the system, if my preferred machine is not available. And we can also do subcontracting. And what that means is, if I say I've got 1,000 pieces at minimum here, it can maybe tell me to do subcontracting on this operation instead of doing it internally. It does add 48 hours to my schedule, but that might result in a better overall schedule. So what the system is actually doing is I've got, my preferred machine, and I've got 2 alternates here. So I've got 3 potential choices to run this operation. And what it does is for every production order that has this operation, it runs a schedule with each one of those potential choices. And then it chooses the best result out of those 3. So you can imagine if I've got 1,000 production orders in the system with 5 operations per production order and a few alternates, the system is literally making millions of decisions to come up with the best schedule possible. There's no way manually doing that is ever going to come close to what the system can do for you. Okay, so that's an important thing to consider. All right, so anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I'm not going to go through all the details, but you can set up a number of different things here to sort of optimize that schedule. Now, once everything is set up, we're going to go out and actually run the schedule. Actually, before I do that, let me just talk briefly about the production orders that we have in the system to schedule. So I've got a bunch of firm plan and I've got a few released orders in there. You can schedule simulated firm plan release, whatever orders you want to schedule, you can. You just set a filter. But these orders here came from a forecast. And it was a weekly forecast. And what that means is the due date for all of these are roughly all the same time frame, right? So that's not really realistic. I can't produce all of these on that same 2 or 3 days. This is maybe a week's worth of manufacturing I need to do. But because it came in from the forecast, they all kind of share the same due date here. And that could be typical in a sales-oriented environment where Friday afternoon salespeople are entering sales orders. Well, guess what the ship date's going to be? It's probably Friday because they didn't bother, or they forgot to change the ship date or the requested shipment date from the customer, and everything's going to be required this Friday afternoon. Well, that's not going to result in a realistic schedule. So at any rate, all of these guys were run through a forecast and generated from MRP. And of course, Business Central is going to do backward schedule based on the due date, and it's not going to give me a realistic schedule. If we go into the graphical scheduler here, again, this is the free tool. It's available and you can use it, right? If I didn't want to use the automated production scheduling, I could run my MRP, get all my production orders, open this guy up, and look at the results of that. So let's take this time here. So a couple of little things on this graphical scheduler. I added in work center loading here. So in these views that are available, you can come in and add in whatever data you want to show on the view with this add data source here, and you can set colors and all sorts of stuff. So all I did compared to the default view is I came in and I added some work center load stuff on here. But the important bit about this is if we look, here's Friday afternoon on my laser cutter work center, everything is scheduled, same day and time basically. Like I couldn't give this out to the shop and say, do this. This would not work, right? Now, I could come in here and, drag and drop these things. Like I could take this guy and I say, oh, I'm going to run this on, this 4-foot laser cutter and drag and drop it over there. And then I could take the next one and drag and drop it. And I can move these things around manually. Well, again, if you've got a few production orders, maybe that makes sense. But who wants to do that, right? I don't want to have to drag and drop all of these different operations and try and make this schedule work. Again, you could fire up the graphical scheduler and do that. What I want to do is I want the system to tell me what the best schedule is based on this load that I have for the shop floor. So the way that we do that is I'm going to hit this generate production schedule. Now, this can also be run in the job queue, so you can set this up to run at 7 a.m. and at 3 p.m. or whatever the schedule you want is. And we have a lot of customers doing it. So typically what happens is when people first start using MX, they'll do it manually and they'll review the schedule and make sure everything looks good and everything else. But once they get used to it, they just run it. Nobody ever looks at the results of the schedule, really. It just runs and it's available to the shop floor, and it's just all automated. Okay. But if I'm doing it manually here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, starting tomorrow, and all my data is way in the past, but starting tomorrow at 8 a.m., give me a schedule. Tell me what the next 30 days in the shop looks like. Right? Now, you can extend this. I could make this a 300-day schedule or whatever, but you should be aware when you set the schedule duration, we're doing a very detailed schedule about what's happening on the shop floor. 30 days is a pretty reasonable goal for seeing what your detailed schedule looks like, because realistically, in most environments, after a day or two, that schedule is going to drift, right? You don't want to schedule 300 days and expect to get a detailed schedule 300 days out. That's never going to be realistic. So 30 days is a good time frame, but you can change this to whatever you like. And then you can schedule it on lock, so you can do a net change or a full schedule. I'm going to do a full schedule. I'm only scheduling my firm plan. So there's a bunch of stuff you can set here, but really all I did was say tomorrow at 8 a.m., tell me what my schedule looks like, and I hit go. And now what it's doing is going out. I've got about 60 production orders in the system. It's going out and running that schedule. That's going to give me the results here in about 20 seconds. If you've got 1,000 production orders with 5 operations apiece, things like that, I'd take a minute or two to run, but it is pretty speedy. It doesn't take a lot of time to run those schedules, and we get our results. Now, what you're looking at here is a list of all the schedule results I've done in the past. So these are really scenarios, scheduling scenarios that I've run, right? So I can go back and look at, previous schedules I've run, and I can look at, what was late, early, on time, all of those sorts of things in here. So it does give you that visibility into what's going to be late. Unlike Standard Business Central, it doesn't really have that concept of this thing's going to be late or not, or early or whatever. So this particular scenario that I ran, I had only 3 orders that were late, tons were early, and a few were on time. My current scenario that I just ran, I've got a ton of late orders, and I can drill down and see which orders are going to be late and things like that, and figure out what to do, like how late are they, and deal with that. And maybe, I look at that and I go, wow, geez, using some of that bottleneck analysis or looking at the schedule, I could decide maybe I'll run a shift on Saturday or something like that. So I add in that Saturday shift, I can rerun the schedule and compare the results. So this is really a way of doing sort of these what if scenarios, like what if I make changes or anything else? How does that impact my schedule performance? And when I'm happy, I can either make the schedule active, or I can actually commit the results. And when I commit the results, it's actually going to go in and update the production orders in Business Central with those scheduled dates and times. Or I can just make the schedule active, and then I can use the MX schedule results to present the information of the shop floor and everything else. If I open up one of these schedule results here, it gives me a very detailed schedule, and I can get even more detailed. I can look at the specific machine load details, the details of each operation, and the attributes associated with that operation. But at this level, I can see by machine. So this welding booth 1 here as an example, if I just filter to that, if I filter to that, I can see this is my schedule for that particular machine. I can see my start date and times and everything else, and the quantities and all of those sorts of things, and everything that needs to be completed to run that production on that particular machine. So this is kind of my dispatch list. If I wanted to, just print this out or whatever and provide it to the shop floor or put it on a screen in the shop or something like that, this is my schedule by machine. Okay, pretty straightforward. But nobody wants to, if you want to review what your schedule looks like, you're not going to, sort of come in here and drill down and look at that. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this sort of visually, right? So I'm going to open up the graphical scheduler, but now it's showing me the results from that automated production schedule. So you can see now on that laser cutter, where it used to be all on the work center on Friday afternoon, it's actually come in here and it's chosen a machine to run that on. And it's done its best to kind of level load that work on those machines so that we're being as efficient as possible with that equipment, right? And you can see here, I've got these short brackets, and the short brackets can run either on this machine or this machine here. The long brackets, and by the way, the text and everything that's in this graphical scheduler, pop-up text and the text in the cell. You can make it whatever you like. The colors as well. This purple is our setup time. The green is the runtime, just to give you an idea of what's going on here. But back to the long bracket, right? So I grabbed this long bracket, and it has to run on this 10-foot. That's what we said, right? It has to run on this machine. As I mentioned earlier, at some point, that 10-foot machine will get overloaded. And so in a case like that, we've now gone in and chosen that alternate machine to do the work on. And again, that alternate machine takes twice as long to run, takes longer to set up, but it still results in a better overall schedule. And so the system has chosen that machine to use instead. Okay. Now, a couple other things you can see, some of these don't have setup time because we're able to eliminate that changeover time by running similar products together. So you can set up all sorts of rules that, bring those products together so they schedule, side by side, so we can eliminate that changeover time, those sorts of things. If I come down here a little bit, this powder coat line, I've set this guy up as an infinite capacity worksim. So we're not actually constraining the schedule based on capacity. You can see here we've got, multiple orders being run on that, machine center simultaneously. And this is kind of common. Like if we know powder coat line doesn't have capacity issues, or if it's a subcontract location or something like that, we'd normally run it as infinite capacity. But maybe I ran this and the powder coat line, the queue time on that was very high, and it's high utilization, it's a bottleneck. I could say, hey, let's turn off the capacity constraints on this and see what I would actually need for this particular machine to generate an ideal schedule. And it'll show me, hey, yeah, you're overloaded at these points in time. Maybe that's when I need to start running a second shift or something like that. So lots of analysis things you can do there as well. If we come down to the welding booths here, there's a couple of things to illustrate here. I mentioned we had, sort of the aluminum and stainless steel products that we're manufacturing. And what I've done is I've said I want to, execute the schedule based on material type. That could be to improve changeover time, or just because, I want to stack all my aluminum first and then my stainless steel or whatever. But here I've got, aluminum, 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 and then we switch over to stainless steel. So again, what I've done is I sequenced by that material type. I'm doing all my aluminum first, and I'm doing my stainless steel. And that's a user attribute that you set. And there's, 40-ish user attributes you can set, something like that, where you could do things like color. That's a pretty common one. I want to go from light to dark and then back down to light again. Or I want to do all my non-allergen, food production and then my allergen food production, right? Or heat treating. I want to start with low temperatures, work my way up to high temperatures, and then slowly work my way back down to low temperatures. So all those sorts of attributes, right? Material type, color, heat, wire gauge, whatever you want to do, we can sequence by that to control how that schedule is generated. Okay, and a question I also get, often at these points is, okay, well, what if I have, I'm sequencing by material type, but I've got a high priority order that I need to get done, outside of the sequence? No problem. There is the concept of a priority within MX, where I could say for this particular order, I'm going to make it a high priority order, and I'm going to override some of these other rules based on that priority to make sure it gets done sooner, right? Customer phones up and it's like, I need this tomorrow. And you can go in and simply change that priority, and it'll reschedule to make sure that order gets done as soon as possible. Now, the other thing on the welding booths here, I've got capacity for, like I've got 2 stations there. So I'm running 2 production orders at all times. But at 4 p.m. here, my shift changes, and instead of having 2 people on staff for welding, I now only have 1 person on staff. So you'll see all of a sudden we're only scheduling a single production order at a time, because I only have labor availability to do 1 production order at a time. I've got shop capacity to do 2, but I don't have enough people. And this is the same concept as if you're doing material, right? So if I didn't have material for a production order here, what it's going to do is it's not going to schedule it until that material is available, again, either based on incoming purchase order dates or transfer order dates, or based on the lead time of that product. So yeah, maybe I don't have a purchase order for that product yet, but I know the lead time is 7 days. Well, that order will get pushed out 7 days in advance, and other orders will fill that gap that leaves based on that. Okay, so again, material, labor, tooling, floor space is another one. We do that, reasonably often. That can be a constraint, right? I can't do this work because I won't have anywhere to put the finished good because I don't have the floor space for it. We can handle that. Okay, so all of those sorts of things are possible. Now that all sounds, all of these goodies, they could sound very complicated and fancy, but it doesn't have to be. Like if you do have these complex scheduling requirements and detailed scheduling requirements, it does take some work to set up that, sort of model of your facility. But if you've got just your standard routings in Business Central at the work center level, and you've got machine centers defined, chances are you can install MX APS, run the setup wizard, run generate schedule, and you'll get a schedule that you can actually execute. And then if you want to add the labor constraints or the material constraints and everything after the fact, you can do that, right? So you can come in and use it in a very simple setup, right? You can come in, set it up very quickly and easily, and run a schedule. Now, if that doesn't work, you'd get a hold of us, and we can help you through and figure out what it's actually going to take to get MX working in your particular environment, right? A lot of these projects are only a couple of days worth of time. Some that are more complex might take significantly longer to do, but we can schedule anything from very simple operations to very complex environments. All right, now I've generated the schedule, I reviewed it, I'm happy with it, I might commit or I might just make it active, and now I need to execute that schedule. So I'm going to go out to the shop floor and actually do work on it. So I might come in and print out a shop package, or maybe I want to go paperless. But the next step is, once I've got that schedule generated, is to actually record what's happening in the shop so that the next time I generate that schedule, we're taking what's happened in the facility into account. And to do that, I'm going to briefly show you a little bit about Shop Floor Insight. And this is a tool that will run in the shop. You can have personal devices, so everybody can have their own tablet or phone or whatever you like, or you can have a shared terminal, which is what I have set up here. So this is just running in a web browser. So a Chromebook is the most common device that people are using today because they're nice and cheap. They don't have rotating parts in them, so they can get all dusty and stuff. They've got a keyboard, all that kind of stuff. You slap a Chromebook out there for 150 bucks with a scanner on it, and I can start recording time in the shop. So the way I do that is I walk up to this share terminal. Maybe I'm in a machining area where I've got 5 CNC machines and a few manual lathes or something like that. So everybody shares this terminal. I walk up, I scan my ID badge, and that's generated from Business Central. So it's just a barcode that you can scan. You can also set it up if you have like door access cards, people could tap that, everything else. And what it did was it opened up my time card for the day. I haven't done anything yet today because this is the first time I clocked in. By the way, the delay on that, let me just scan my badge to lock the screen again. The delay on that was this logging into Business Central. So the first time you do it, in the morning, the first time anybody logs in, I shouldn't say that. The first time the first person for the day logs in, takes a few seconds to connect up to Business Central. After that, it's pretty much instant, right? There I go, I scan my badge, shows me my time card for the day. And if you're using a paper-based system, I simply scan a barcode for the production order that I'm working on. It clocks me into that and calculates the amount of time I'm spending on this particular production order, right? So we know the elapsed time. And now this is all real time with Business Central. So a production planner or salesperson or whatever can see exactly what's going on with these production orders in real time. And there's a bunch of goodies here. We can show linked documents like assembly diagrams, work instructions, quality inspections. We can do output consumption, a ton of stuff you can do there. But the bottom line is we can report what we've actually completed in the shop floor so the scheduler can pick that up. And one of the nice things is we have traceability here as well. Most of the time when people talk about traceability, they're talking about material, what lot numbers or serial numbers that I consume or produce. Well, this also gives us labor traceability. I've got a warranty problem 3 months from now. Who did that work? Is that a trend? Is it always this guy that's causing me my warranty problems? Or maybe I want to flag this thing as rework and I want to have root cause associated with that rework. Right? So we can do all sorts of analysis and figure out what's going on the shop floor. Okay. Now this is paper-based. So if I have a traveler out there that I scan, the other option is if I come in here, I'm going to come in as somebody else. I'm in here as Linda now. and it shows the dispatch list. So this is the schedule that MX has generated for us. And I've just got her filtered down to engineering, but this could be laser cutter or welding or whatever, or she could see the entire, schedule for all departments. But this is, what's coming up at her particular work center for the next day or week or hour or whatever you want to set that filter to in Business Central. So she can see kind of what the schedule is. She can tap on one of these things, like if you use a touch screen or just use the mouse and keyboard. But you can tap on one of these things, see a bunch of stuff. Her view is a little different than the one I had before. Tap clock on and start that work, right? So you don't have to go with a traveler. You can go paperless if you want and just use the dispatch list to select what you're working on and clock on from here. Okay, so that's a little bit about the execution side. So just to recap, in Business Central, you can use our enhanced planning pack to do your forecasting, planning, your purchasing, all that kind of stuff. You then schedule that, the planned orders to get a realistic and optimal production schedule. And then you can use Shop Floor Insight to capture what's happening in the shop floor. And then when we're done, you can use one of the other tools to maybe ship that out of the environment. We've also got a number of analysis tools you can use. These are part of the enhanced planning pack. So for example, routing analysis here, I've captured my actual times. I've got my expected times that I've scheduled, and I've captured my actual times. Well, what I can do is go in there and do an analysis of, do my expected times, come close to what my average actual times are. And so it'll give you the actual difference and the percent difference between what I expected and what it actually took, right? So this is a good way to maintain those routings so that the next time you run the production schedule, you're getting, very accurate schedule. And the other nice thing about this is the standard deviation. So that's a measure of the variability in that process. So if I have a high standard deviation, like if I'm out by a sigma or two, that's a problem. Because what that means is every time I do this production, even if the difference is maybe 1 or 2%, right? Like my expected is maybe 2 hours and my actual is 2 hours. If I've got a lot of variability, that's a problem. Like Joe does it in an hour, Fred does it in 5 hours, Jill does it in 3 hours. That is as much of a problem as whether I'm kind of coming close on average to my expected time. So this is a great tool for figuring out where the variability is in your process to sort of clamp down on those shop floor processes and things like that. And then we've also got an analysis worksheet that on a production order by production order basis, you can go in and you can look at a very detailed overview. Actually, let's grab one that's got more detail than that. Close enough. A very detailed overview of all the variances on specific production orders. So it does quantity variance and cost variance on the components, and it also does labor variance as well. And most people hide a lot of these fields, but it breaks it down in a very detailed way to see what the variances are, from your expected to your actuals. And if it's tied to a sales order, it'll also give you your margin on that sale. So lots of analysis tools. These guys here are part of the enhanced planning pack. All of these modules work together, but they can all be purchased independently. So for example, you can use MX without using shop floor or enhanced planning pack, or you could use enhanced planning pack without using anything else. So you can mix and match depending on what you want to use within your facility. All right, let's jump in and talk about some of the advantages. So I'm not going to go through these in any great detail. You can read the slide there, but really what it's doing is it's making everything better, right? When you have a good schedule, it impacts pretty much every department in your organization. Everything from sales to HR to manufacturing, quality, everything gets improved. And really what you're going to get is better throughput, right? I didn't mention local optimization, but that is something that you see go away when you use something like MX, because it's going to give you a very detailed schedule, and it prevents people from going off on their own and working on things that they shouldn't be working on. And that's local optimization, right? Somebody comes in and they're supposed to work on production order 10 at this point, but it's not quite there yet, but there's a pallet of stuff sitting beside them. They'll start work on that instead because they want to keep busy. That's a good thing, right? Well, the problem is now the one they were supposed to work on is delayed, and that delays the downstream processes. And what happens is you end up generating a ton of WIP and everything is late. So if you walk into a facility and you see a ton of WIP out on the shop floor, but everybody's busy and production orders are coming in late, you've got a problem with scheduling, specifically local optimization, most likely. But anyway, MX fixes that. It'll increase that throughput pretty significantly when people follow that schedule. And of course, reduction in inventory and WIP and labor and everything else. Ton of things that it improves when you run MX. All right. Now, for all of that goodies, what does it cost you? Well, it's based on how many production orders you run within the system. And what that means is, if I've licensed, the software for 75 production orders, I can run 500 schedules today as long as I'm only scheduling 75 production orders at a time. And the cost for these 75 production orders, I believe, is about $185 a month. And you can schedule up to 75 production orders at a time. And it goes up from there. So the next tier, I think, is 200 production orders and then 500 or something like that. But check with your partner. They'll be able to get your pricing or contact us and we can help you out. So it is a pretty low cost solution for automating all that scheduling. Like if I have 50 production orders in there, no human is going to be able to realistically or reasonably schedule those production orders, in a day, right? Like not to the level of optimization that MX is going to give you. So for that $185 or whatever a month, it eliminates all of that time. You're going to save that money the first day you use the system, really. All right. Now, one last thing here, very complex environments. So what we say as a threshold is something around 20,000 operations if you're using the advanced constraints or things like order sets and some advanced modeling capabilities, may require premium hosting. And what that means is your schedule is so complex that it's really making hundreds of millions of decisions as it's running the schedule. And that's not an exaggeration. It will literally make that many decisions as it's running the schedule. So in cases like that, we may have to bump you up to a premium hosting. Like everything is still built into Business Central, but the actual engine that runs is hosted in Azure. We may have to bump you up, and that might have a small additional cost for that. But generally on that price list, if you don't have a crazy, scary environment to schedule, the cost in the price list is that your partner can get you is what you would pay. As far as implementation goes, again, sometimes it's a couple of hours of our time to help you walk through some of those scenarios, and sometimes it's significantly longer. We have a fixed price discovery fee where we'll come in, we'll do discovery, we'll help you, get trained up on how it works and everything else. And in a lot of cases, after that discovery, you're up and running. In other cases, it gives us the information we need to get your quote on what the final project will look like. Okay, but generally speaking, most projects are somewhere between 1 or 2 days and a week of time to get up and running. And there's a whole bunch that have just, people have done it themselves because the routings are in good shape. They install it, they do the setup wizard, they hit go, and they're up and running. Right? Now, if you do have any questions on any of that, feel free to contact us. Again, your partner should be able to help you out with some of that pricing. If not, go to our website, NameandSideworks.com, or if you go to schedulingfordynamics.com, you'll find us. Use the chat box or the contact form, and we'll get back to you with whatever information you need. All right, with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Hope that was helpful, and hopefully we will talk again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more great content, and remember to hit that bell icon to stay updated. See you in the next video.